Aloha and good morning. It is 9:02 a.m. on Thursday, January 11th, 2024, and I call the Planning and the Economy Committee meeting to order. I would like to welcome the following committee members who are present in the council chambers. Committee Vice Chair Cordero and Council Member Okimoto. I believe Council Member Say should be coming in shortly. Council Member Wire is excused for today. Pursuant to Hawaii Revised Statute, Section 92-3.7, this meeting will be conducted as a remote meeting by interactive conference technology with the following procedures in effect for the meeting. Members of the public will be allowed to provide oral testimony remotely or in person in the council chamber on all items on the agenda when each item is taken up. All persons who register to testify in person will be called upon first, followed by those who register to testify remotely. Persons who have not registered will be given an opportunity to testify following the registered testifiers. For those standing by remotely, please utilize the Zoom raise hand feature to indicate your desire to speak. For those joining us by telephone only, please press *9 to indicate your desire to speak. Before testifying, each person shall state their full name and will be limited to a 1-minute presentation on each item. HR Section 92-3.7 requires all votes at a remote meeting to be conducted by a roll call unless unanimous. I will first call for objections, and if there are any, I will call for a roll call vote. For those council members participating from outside of the council chamber, under HRS Section 92-3.7, the meeting will automatically recess if we lose audio-visual contact with you and cannot reconvene until we reestablish contact. Therefore, please announce beforehand if you will be voluntarily signing out of the meeting. Written testimonies, including the testifier's address, email address, and phone number, will be available to the public as described on the posted agenda. As a courtesy, please turn off all cell phones. Moving to agenda item number 1, Resolution 23-270 accepts a gift to the City of Travel from Hawaii Public Health Institute, valued at $138.79 for the Office of Economic Revitalization's Food Equity and Access Specialist to attend the Maui Food Summit in Makawao, Maui on November 3rd, 2023. For the administration, we have Amy Asobai, Executive Director of the Office of Economic Revitalization, and welcome, Councilmember Say.
Good morning, Vice Chair and council members. If you have any questions about the travel, the $138 was provided to the Office of Economic Revitalization Food Equity and Access Specialist for her round-trip airfare to attend the Maui Food Summit.
Thank you. I have no, well, first of all, members, are there any questions on this item? I don't have any requests on this item, but I would like to know the status of your office's efforts to replace Dexter Kishida. Is this person replacing Dexter, or are you still looking for a candidate?
We are still seeking a candidate. We've had a number of interviews, and we have 2 positions: the Sustainable Agriculture and Food Systems Program Manager, which is the position that Dexter Kishida filled, and then we had a Food Equity and Access Specialist position, which was previously filled by Lucas McKinnon. He's now at the Hawaii Good Food Alliance, and Julia Ailamo had been an AmeriCorps Vista with that team and has stepped up into the Food Equity and Access Specialist position.
Okay.
So we're still working to fill those positions, and sorry, I have had recent surgery and I look a little funny.
Oh, no worries. Yesterday, we had a hearing before the Housing Committee, and the chair of the Department of Agriculture was there and lamented that she was hoping that we would have someone, and I politely reminded her that they took Dexter Kishida to be their deputy. And then if they want to help us, they can help identifying a candidate. But thank you so much. We will now proceed with in-person testimony in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers for this item?
Sure, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the chamber who would like to testify on this item? Please come forward to the testifier podium and begin by stating your name. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you so much. Members, we are in discussion. Councilmember Cordero, Vice Chair Cordero.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Director Asabai. I was just wondering about the attendance of a Maui-specific food summit, and I was wondering, of course, when we have these county-specific summits, of course, we look for intersectionality between the counties as well. And I was wondering if Oahu is set to hold their own summit of some sort, and if that's where this connection has come from too.
Exactly. Thank you for the question. So the Hawaii Public Health Institute is the facilitator for food summits across each of the islands and the counties. What we were really happy to be able to participate in is to make sure that our initiatives, align across the state, number one. Number two, they have a well-established Eat Local program on Maui that we would love to build into our Good Food program here. So we were able to learn a little bit more about that, as well as how the wildfires impacted agriculture, what they're planning to do to mitigate it, and any lessons learned. So I think that was an important part of being able to be over on Maui, and the Oahu Food Summit was held in December, and we had folks from all the islands come over here in December. So
That's good to hear. And also relating to, because a lot of since HPH was hosting this or facilitating this, do they assist with the counties finding federal grants, or is it still incumbent on all of us to still pursue those?
That is on us to pursue grants to support our work. They've been a great partner, and potentially in the future, if the missions in terms of the projects align, we might be able to work with them. But as it stands, we're close to putting a contract out to bid for a grants contractor for all of the MDO offices to be more competitive in our pursuit of federal awards.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Members, any other questions? If there are none, the chair recommends that Resolution 23-270 be reported out for adoption. Any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Moving to agenda item number 2 for action. Resolution 22-287 accepts a gift to the City of Online Training and Certification Program from the Ventus Network, LLC, valued at $15,979 for the Office of Economic Revitalization to train, certify, and improve the Housing and Stabilization Services Program. For the administration, again, we have Amy Asobai, Executive Director of the Office of Economic Revitalization.
Thank you, Chair Kia'aina. I'm really happy to actually be able to accept this gift. This is an opportunity for 10 staff, which will include staff from the Office of Economic Revitalization, Catholic Charities Hawaii, the Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, and the Department of Community Services to work together to learn and be trained in the Lean Six Sigma program, so we can improve the Housing Stabilization Services program under the Rental and Utility Relief program.
That's actually great to hear. So it's not going to be limited to just OER staff, but also for some of the vendors that you currently have programmatic services with. Good to hear. Members, do any of you have any questions for the director? Councilmember Okimoto.
Thank you, Chair. Really quick, Director Asabi, I'm not familiar with the Lean Six Sigma program. If you could just quickly explain it to me so I understand what it is. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm happy to do that. I feel like I wish I had been able to do this at some point in my career, but I'm happy that our staff and the Department of Community Services, as well as our vendors, will get to be involved. So this is just kind of from their write-up. It's a project-based learning experience, and it guides teams through a process improvement project that delivers measurable results. So in 8 weeks, the team will work together to, one, select and define a process improvement project, and that project is the Housing Stabilization Services. They will measure the process's existing performance by collecting data. They will analyze process data and identify improvement opportunities. They will improve the process by implementing solutions that address root causes, verify the process has improved, and control process performance by creating monitoring plans and standard operating procedures. We felt that the Housing Stabilization Services was a great program for this because, as you can imagine, with rental relief winding down and the Housing Stabilization Services still having about $7 million available through it, we want to make sure that the 20,000 plus households that have been able to take advantage of the relief funding also have the case management services, the housing assistance, kind of navigation services in terms of housing as opposed to relief, that they can do financial literacy classes. There's also opportunities for mediation and other legal services available through housing stabilization.
Thank you. And who runs this program?
Both Catholic Charities and CNHA are running this program for rental relief beneficiaries.
Got it. Thank you, Director Asabi. Thank you, Chair.
Any other questions?
Chair?
Vice Chair Cordero.
Okay, thank you. So is there a timeline for the training and or the sessions to be completed by? Because I do know that in the Committee on Budget, we did talk about the rent and utility relief program possibly, I guess, running out of money or sunsetting possibly by April. And so I was just wondering if that's going to occur prior to then and the rest of the money's being dispersed.
So, okay. There's a bunch of different resources coming to the rental and utility relief program. ERA 1 was the first funding from the Treasury under the American Rescue Plan that has been finalized and closed. ERA 2 was a separate line of financial assistance, and it allowed the creation of the Housing Stabilization Services Program. The council has also provided, as well as the mayor, additional funding through the state and local fiscal recovery funds. So we are still expending the last $5 million of the state and local fiscal recovery funds, while we have about $7 million left available under Housing Stabilization Services under the ERA 2. So 2 separate programs, the relief and financial assistance. We are, hopefully you saw a couple of the updates to do in-person assistance events through this month. We think it just depends on how many people they can actually get through in these in-person assistant events and then how much those folks are requesting. We're projecting that we'll be able to have in-person assistance events for first-time applicants through the month of January, and then they will finish processing those through the next month or 2, and that is the end, basically, of the financial assistance that will be available. So there is separate staffing and separate programming for housing stabilization that, as I mentioned, is like case management, mediation, legal services, financial literacy training, et cetera.
Thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes, and
Okay.
also for the housing stabilization program, I was wondering, will that then be coming through other federal funding that would be coming downstream to the counties or to the city and county, or are we going to be implementing that through our OER budget?
No, that was allocated through the ERA 2 funding in 2022 and is continuing to be executed. We have authority from the U.S. Treasury to spend that money through September 30th of 2025. And so We do not intend to request additional money for housing stabilization services. Additionally, because it's program-related, it doesn't go out in the large chunks like financial assistance does. So we made sure in the contract that we could move that funding over to financial assistance if the need arose. And we have already moved 1.8 million of the original 10 million over to provide financial assistance for rental relief households.
Okay, thank you. So the Housing Stability Services Program is able to be, not, I don't want to say housed, but implemented through the staffing that you have currently then?
It is different staff at Catholic Charities and CNHA than those who basically process applications. Those folks who process applications have a certain level of training and skill that they bring to it. For the housing stabilization services, Catholic Charities and CNHA have hired more along the lines of clinical social workers to do that work. So, different type of training and skill set required.
Understood. Thank you for that, that explanation.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, if there are no other questions, we will now proceed with in-person testimony in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify on this item? Please come forward to the testifier podium and begin by stating your name. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you so much. Members, we are in discussion. If there, Council Member Say.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Okay, for the Director Asobe, my concern would be one, yesterday, and this is the beginning of the year, there is no representation from the state. Even though it's a county program, as far as the participants, would you have not wanted to invite someone from HPHA to be a part of this training program? I'm looking long-term, Madam Chair. Or are we just focusing on just the two vendors that have done the services for the Rental Utility Relief Fund program? I'm looking at it at a broader perspective on behalf of the office that you run, and not having that state participation makes me feel like we're doing something, they're doing something, and we're not cohesive in addressing the issue of housing.
Well, we only had a certain number of slots. We appreciate the generous gift provided by Ventus to be able to do the training. And yes, it is critically important that we process, improve, and collect better data on this program so more people are participating in it. And so that is strictly the relationship OER, CNHA, and Catholic Charities. We felt that it was important to include the Department of Community Services because the Community-Based Development Division provides similar type services to the community members that they serve. We're happy that the CBDD division put forward a number of members so we can co-train on this, but we simply didn't have enough spaces for this free training we're being provided to add additional members. That's not exclusionary to the state, but just based on what was offered to us.
Okay, then the next question, simply put, if I was to go through this training process and I get a certificate or a license, how does one determine the qualifications of qualifying or getting that certification or license? Even as an example, you're doing how many hours of training? 1.5 hours of training. Okay. Who is doing a comparative analysis to say this certificate says that you are qualified for what this particular program is about? My concern is that, is this particular vocation or occupation tied to DCCA, Department of Commerce and Consumer Affairs, as far as the regulatory process of these type of positions? And does it coincide with HR. HR, Human Resources Department.
Right, you mean the type of training
Right,
provided
right.
by our Department of Human Resources?
I guess most of these participants are college graduates.
Yes,
Okay,
all.
so they have a degree.
Mhm.
Then this particular degree gives them another opportunity of expanding their horizons in regards to other positions that they may look forward to as far as within the state or city or private sector. My point is that just because you have a 4.5 hours of training, what does that Opalapala represent? You know, it's just like getting a law degree, or maybe I'm old school, maybe I'm old fashioned. But if that's the future, that what is the process in regards to getting a certificate that shows that you're educated in this particular field?
So for us in the Office of Economic Revitalization, every opportunity that we have to professionalize the services, the processes, the program management skills of our team, we want to do that because we want to be able to better serve the public.
Correct.
I understand that the Department of Human Resources is very interested in expanding training opportunities for the city and county employees because that will help retain more city and county employees if they have the opportunity within their employment here in the city to learn more, to do more, and to potentially advance based on the type of certificate training that they are providing. So I feel that, you know, this is a great opportunity. This is a nationally recognized business program. The certificate, the training that you're talking about is just the or online training with the trainers. The folks who are participating are also required to participate in their own online asynchronous modules that they'll be working on. So, I mean, honestly, I would love to be able to provide it to my whole team in terms of process improvement, doing better with our metrics and data analysis, and being able to analyze and better understand program improvement over time. I would love to also share this with the Department of Human Resources, but it is an expensive program, as you can see.
Okay.
And so I think it's a matter of the resources that they can apply to training opportunities within the city.
Okay, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilmember, and thank you, Director. Councilmember Say, your points are well taken, but clearly on the capacity building front, we have to prioritize strengthening the capacity within our city operations. And I'm quite confident that if the state so desired, they can work directly with this company as well. We shouldn't have to be doing their job for them. Yeah. Yes, okay. Thank you so much. The chair recommends that Resolution 23-287 be reported out for adoption. Any objections, reservations? Hearing none, so ordered. Thank you, Director. Moving on to agenda item number 3, an informational briefing to provide an update to the council and the public on the status of Bill 10, 2022, CD1, and Bill 64, 2023, FD1, relating to use regulations of the city's land use ordinance. Members, as you may recall, at the request of the Department of Permitting and Planning Director Don Apuna, the council took a break on hearings to amend Bill 10, 2022 after the Planning and the Economy May 25th, 2023 meeting. Since we have not had hearings on Bill 10, 2022, now Bill 64, 2023, since then, I have asked DPP to start us off today to provide us a short background and refresher on the city's land use ordinance, DPP's initiative to overhaul the land use ordinance, including a description of updates that have already been made, the scope of amendments under Bill 10, and what sections of the LUO would still need to be updated after passage of Bill 10. We have from the administration, after the passage of Bill 64. We have from the administration Ms. Elizabeth Kruger, Chief Planner of the Department of Planning and Permitting. She will be providing us with a presentation which a copy of the presentation is in your handouts and is available online as Departmental Communication 25. Thank you for joining us today.
Good morning, Chair Kia Aina and Vice Chair Cordero and council members. My name is Elizabeth Krieger. I'm the Chief Planner of the Land Use Permits Division with the Department of Planning and Permitting. I'm delighted to join you today to share this PowerPoint presentation. Before I get started, I want to say that we're featuring some original art from our former staff and current state staff, Janet Menke-Lau. And I also want to give a huge shout out and thank you to one of my newest planners, Lynn Kong, for helping me put together this presentation, which you'll see is very fancy relative to what we normally come with. So I'd like to talk about the land use ordinance. First of all, I'd like to discuss historically, the first zoning regulations date back to the 1920s. In those days, they were addressing the problems of the day, which primarily involved things like fires hopping from wood-framed building to wood-framed building. So some of the earliest zoning regulations are relating to setbacks and building separation distances. We then had major updates to the zoning code in 1969, 1986, and 1999. 1969 was the adoption of the Comprehensive Zoning Code. That was the first time that a really robust, long zoning code was adopted that included everything from parking to zoning regulations, zoning maps, sign regulations, landscaping regulations, all kinds of things. Then in 1986, the land use ordinance was adopted. That again updated the plans after several of the regional plans were updated in the early 1980s. And then in 1999, they amended the land use ordinance just to mostly reorganize and clean up issues that had arisen since 1986. The purpose of zoning, in short, just like in one sentence, is to encourage orderly development and to promote public health, safety, and welfare. So everything we do is related to this fundamental purpose. The land use ordinance is a long document. It's almost, I think, 300 pages or so, and it includes several things. So I'm going to go through just really briefly what it includes today. First of all, it lays out the zoning districts. It names the zoning districts, tells you the purpose of each zoning district, and it lays out how the zoning maps are adopted. And then it implements the city's general plan, the development plans, and the sustainable communities plans. So we have 8 plan areas, which I've listed up there. And I'm gonna move along. The land use ordinance also specifies when land use permits are required. So when a conditional use permit's required, when a zoning adjustment's required, that type of thing. That's in Article 2. It specifies development standards, for example, height, density, setbacks, and that changes from zoning district to zoning district. So residential zoning districts versus industrial versus the business districts, they all have different development standards. It specifies standards for specific uses. So Bill 10 and Bill 64 are looking at this section specifically. So right now, it specifies whether there are use standards relating to everything from agribusiness activities to zoos. And then it specifies parking and loading requirements. That's in Article 6, which talks about how many parking are required, how big they have to be, how much loading, how big it has to be, how much aisle width is needed, how much landscaping is required around those parking spaces. And then Article 7 has our sign requirements, so how big your sign can be, how many signs you can have, how tall they can be above the ground. All of those things are specified there. And then, of course, we have definitions that live in Article 10. We are also updating definitions through Bill 64. So that's been a big discussion point. And then finally, in Article 9, we have our special district requirements. So we have 7 special districts right now, which are listed here. And each special district has a different goal and objective. So for example, the goals and objectives of the Diamond Head and the Punch Bowl special districts are both looking at the natural features of those areas and making sure to protect the physical environment surrounding those monuments. And then you have something like the Chinatown Special District and the Haleiwa Special District, which is not listed. So we also have the Haleiwa Special District. So those are both looking at the historic nature and the architectural features of those districts. So that's a very quick summary of what the land use ordinance does right now. And now we're going to pivot on to the LUO update. So like I said, the last comprehensive update was in 1999. As you know, we have land use ordinance updates regularly. Usually it's very topic specific. So somebody is interested in, say, wind machines, and we amend the wind machine section of the code. With that comprehensive update in 1999, they did look at reorganizing, which again, we're always trying to organize the LUO so that it's as user-friendly as possible. So that's what we're doing again today. The project started in 2018. The first phase was for stakeholder outreach. Our consultant for the first phase was RM Towel Corporation. They obtained input from 100 individuals and professional organizations, and then they compiled all of that into deliverables. So I've brought the deliverables with me. You can see that they're thick and heavy, and they have tables and charts summarizing the stakeholder feedback that they got. And then this information was given to our consultant for phases 2 through 5. I've listed the URL so that you can see them online, but we also have hard copies if you'd like to see. So that was completed in 2019. The deliverables were given to us in 2019, and we proceeded with phase 2. Phase 2 is what we're in right now. So phase 2, the completion of that culminated in our transmittal to the Planning Commission, and when the Planning Commission transmitted it to the City Council, it became Bill 10. Bill 10, of course, was nearing its 2-year automatic filing deadline, so it was reintroduced as Bill 64, 2023, which is what we're currently working on. So with phase 2, our consultant first did an outreach survey to over 300 neighborhood board members, and then they did follow-up interviews with those people that we received survey responses from, as well as other stakeholders. For example, they met with utility organizations, telecommunications organizations, the state energy office, that type of thing, and also like HECO and several people. Once Bill 10 was introduced, there were several committee hearings about it, as well as presentations, and then it even went to second reading, so it did have the full public hearing. The next phase of the LUO update is for the permit processes, so that's doing Article 2. So what we're trying to do with this is make sure that we don't have as many types of permits with all different kinds of timelines and all different materials required. So what we're trying to do is consolidate permits so that all of the procedures are more easily understood by our applicants. And then phase 4 is the zoning districts and development standards. That's going to be the one where we look at whether we're still good with our current levels of density and height, and for those various zoning districts. So that's going to be a fun one. And then finally, phase 5 is for basically any remaining sections, as well as cleanup of the entire thing, trying to make sure that we have readability. We're really hoping to be able to include things like hyperlinks and just ways to make sure that the public can quickly and easily find every part of the zoning code that talks about their interests. So for example, if they're looking at home occupations, they'd be able to quickly and easily figure out what the zoning code says about home occupations. So the status of Bill 64, I already discussed this, so I think that the bottom line here is that we're working off of the Bill 64 FD1 for all of our meetings going forward. And in the past meetings, so especially since this committee was convened, we began looking at the use category. So I'm going to really quickly go over the types of uses that are in each category. Currently, like I told you, the special uses are listed from A to Z, which helps if you're looking through a glossary, but it's not especially helpful if you're like, but what about all of the industrial uses? If I'm trying to figure out which industrial use I am, it would be easier for me if they were all listed right next to each other. So that's one thing that we're doing here. So the industrial uses were discussed in committee meetings on March 2nd and April 6th, 2023. Some examples of industrial uses include manufacturing and processing, repair, storage and warehousing, base yards, waste disposal and processing, airports and truck terminals, as well as marine uses. Moving on from there, we talked about commercial uses on April 6th and May 25th, 2023. Commercial uses include, among other things, eating and drinking establishments, retail, lodging, office, medical facilities, commercial parking, personal services, indoor and outdoor recreation, and then gas stations and car washes. The next thing that we're going to talk about next month is residential uses. Residential uses include 1 and 2 family dwellings, multi-unit dwellings, group living facilities, small and large, accessory dwelling units, ohana units, rooming, being people staying in houses where the family lives, and home occupations. So those are all use categories listed in the residential section of Bill 64 FD1. And then the next we have is communication and utility uses. This includes things like telecommunication and transmitting antennas. And then we have our utilities, small, medium, and large. So this sounds a little bit dry, but it actually has a lot of things that we're going to want to talk about, including solar energy generation, wind energy generation, stormwater retention, drainage systems, water tanks, and electrical substations. So that one's going to be a hot topic. Next, we have our public and civic uses. So this includes government facilities. It also includes meeting facilities, schools, K through 12 vocational and universities, as well as parks and open space, consulates, cemeteries, and prisons. And then our final use that I believe Chair Kia Aina is saving for last because it's probably going to be the most meaty of all, are agricultural uses. So our agricultural uses include big categories like crop production. Under crop production, we have aquaculture, crop raising, plant nurseries, vertical farms, and urban agriculture. We also have livestock keeping and animal raising, agricultural support. So for example, storage of agricultural products processing, and servicing of agricultural equipment, and potentially also livestock. And then finally, we have our agricultural accessory uses. Those include agritourism, farm dwellings, and farm worker housing. So all of those are very hot topics. We have been working with the agricultural users to discuss how the original Bill 10 works for them and what they might need to see change for our next phases. The other thing that I forgot to mention earlier is that before these 5 phases of the LUO update were completed, we also did, through a separate grant, we did updates to the parking regulations, which I believe were adopted in December of 2020. So that was another big time when we came to this council with a lot of discussions about parking and loading. So that completes my presentation. I'm happy to accept or to answer any questions that you have. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to discuss the exciting work that we do every day, and I'm happy to share.
Thank you, Ms. Kruger, for that information. Members, I also wanted to go over the process that I intend to follow for considering amendments to Bill 64 as the Planning and Economy Chair before we go into questions. A handout of the process was distributed to each of you, and it is also available online as Council Communication 2. When do I read this? First slide, please. So as was mentioned with regard to Bill 64, 2023, it was introduced last November to continue all of the good progress of Bill 10, 2022 that had been undertaken, both by Zoning Chair Brandon Elefante, as well as myself. The council passed Bill 64 FD1 on December 6th, and this FD1 represents changes made to Bill 10, 2022 as of the last Planning and the Economy meeting on May 25th, 2023. As DPP shared, the committee will be considering modifications by use categories, and mahalo so much to the Department of Planning and Permitting for going through the uses to give everyone an idea of what kinds of uses fall under each use category. The committee is considering modifications by uses, and as you can see on the table of permitted uses, table 21-5.1, which starts on page 3 of the FD1, each use category is in a different shade. For example, agriculture uses is in green, residential uses is in orange. There are 6 use categories: industrial use, which we considered in March and April of last year, commercial use, which we considered in April and May of last year, and it is the intent to consider residential uses at our next P&E committee in February and possibly in March 2024. That will be followed by public, civic, and institutional uses. And if you saw from DPP's presentation, I just wanted to note that the communication and utility uses actually falls under public, civic, and institutional uses so that there's no confusion. They don't have their own category. And as was also mentioned, due to the numerous inquiries and concerns raised by stakeholders island-wide, we will be leaving agricultural use for last and followed by miscellaneous use. So for February, the committee will only be considering amendments to residential uses, which, as DPP mentioned, includes household living, group living, and accessory residential uses. If you go to table 21-5.1 for residential uses, it starts on page 4 of the FD1. And as you could see by this page, there are the various subcategories under each of these headings. Members, I anticipate a large focus of our hearings to focus on where multi-unit dwellings will be allowed in the business district, what kinds of business can be operated from our homes or apartments, and what situations accessory dwelling units can be developed. The anticipated schedule is as follows. Of course, we're having an informational briefing today as a refresher to remind ourselves what has transpired over the last 2 years. The next hearing, we will be focusing on residential use, both on February 8th and possibly on March 7th. And we are expecting to cover public, civic, and institutional use amendments, hopefully in April 2024. With regard to upcoming important dates and deadlines for residential amendments, a memo to members with instructions and relevant page numbers. We're anticipating getting it out on January 17th. The council member amendment forms are due on January 24th. My initial amendments will be posted by January 25th. And the initial committee agenda filed with proposed amendments is expected around January 26th. So, in summary, a revised and final P&E agenda will be filed with my final proposed amendments on February 2nd. Is that it? And for anyone who has any questions, I highly recommend that you go to our website, which the City Council put together at honolulucitycouncil.org/Bill 64. And you can always call my Chief of Staff, Jocelyn Doan, at our office or via email. So thank you very much for that. And at this time, I'll take questions from the members for the Department of Permitting and Planning. Members, any questions? Councilmember Shea.
Yeah. Director Kruger, Division Director Kruger, Elizabeth. I think for me, one of the missing points of our land use ordinance is the correlation with real property tax. And I don't know if our predecessors have discussed that idea, because 3 years ago, there was an issue in regards to how the solar farms and the wind farms have all of their industrial uses in agricultural zone properties. And I just wanted to figure it out if the administration has looked at it, have they ever tied in land use ordinance with real property tax zoning. Because just like we're just giving more and more of special use permits, conditional use permits, succumbing to the state in regards to permitted uses in ag and, et cetera. Your thoughts about it, something that will be consistent rather than, I respect my good friend at Kualoa Ranch with all these amenities that he has today with his conditional use permit. But more importantly, I want to get more revenues on behalf of you folks. How's that?
Yeah, thank you for the question, Council Member Say. I agree that it would be very nice if the real property tax assessment use categories were the same as zoning use categories. They do serve kind of a fundamentally different requirement. And also there's an interesting thing about how DPP permits are not necessarily required to switch from one land use to another land use if the building is not changing in any way. So in some ways, the tax assessment is looking at real-time use day to day. And, sometimes we'll have a permit that was issued in 1965 for one thing, and, and now it's being taxed and used in a different way. So there is definitely symmetry, but it's not a one-for-one comparison, but definitely, and this project isn't looking at real property categories, but if there were such an update, we'd be interested in discussing it with the real property division.
Madam Chair, may I ask another question?
Absolutely.
Thank you. The other point I wanted to bring up is that maybe for the council members who are here, Vice Chair Cordero and maybe Chair, all three of the young women who are members of the council now here, was the issue for me in regards to for District 5, that is the primary urban center. I made a statement that, hey, that's the most highly dense district in the county of Oahu. Should we not get more preference in regards to road safety and all that other things we had discussed this past week? And I brought that up with Director Morton because of the increased density, you're going to get more incidents that occur. And I don't have the answer, but I bring this up that as a priority, can we have these 8 different the beginning of your presentation, the primary urban center, the East Honolulu, district, etc., that we can prioritize so that where the density is, maybe you get a higher percentage of county services. I'm just trying to look at how I can help District 5.
That's how inequity starts, okay? Vice Chair Cordero.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, again. Okay, first off, my one question that I have is relating to what you just mentioned about, if they get a permit for a specific use. One thing I'm especially looking at is where we are having issues relating to industrial and then industrial use, but now used for residential and different types of classifications. I know that we're talking about real property assessment at this point, but because there are different uses as well, the things that the residents or neighbors in Kalihi facing are, I guess, limitations to their property as well, while they do have multi-generational families living there. So I don't know how to ask a question, but I guess because you did bring that up, I did want to give like a good example of that and figuring out how to, figure out how to make it right so that the right proper use that's been going on for decades can be fixed. Because right now it just seems like it's non-conforming use, and it may stay that way. But if we have the opportunity to address that during the residential use portion, I would be open to hearing about that and figuring out where we can make such amendments to do so.
Are you saying that current residential areas are being overtaken by industrial uses, or the opposite?
Currently opposite, but actually there are instances where it does happen, maybe below limits in Kalihi.
Yes, definitely. One of the interesting things about zoning is that there are all these different philosophies, and there's the whole Euclidean zoning idea of keep the separate uses totally separate, and then we go back and forth and we keep calling it new ideas, where we now say, hey, mixed use is great, mixed use is the future, mixed use is, when we had walkable communities and people could live above their stores and all of that. But they do bring up these issues of noise and nuisances that maybe people don't want to deal with in their residential areas. So the people living in some of these high density parts of the city are, they get some real benefits of having great bus lines and lots of shops close by, but then they have the impacts related to the both commercial and potentially light industrial uses, say in Kalihi Kai, and the Nimitz area, Iwilei. So definitely, there's also one other thing to consider with all of this discussion is sort of the intersection between real property tax, the building code, occupancy code, and then zoning. So building code and occupancy code are looking at what materials to use, how you can design a room that's designed to have 100 people in it versus a room that's supposed to have like 1 employee in an industrial area. And then sometimes people think they can just quick change that, so they can take this, say, cheap warehouse and turn it into a dance club, and that's not okay, because maybe even the zoning would allow that, but the building code and occupancy code would require upgrades to those buildings to ensure that safety is kept. So we definitely have, there are so many competing interests, and it's what makes the conversation so interesting.
Thank you. Very interesting example you used. Funny but relevant. Very relevant. In my district. Okay, so may I have you run back down, because I know that you said, the correlation between real property assessment, building code, and then you said occupancy code. Am I missing any other thing that you listed just there?
And zoning code.
Zoning.
Yep.
Okay, but not specifically land use then.
Yeah, I mean, the zoning code being land use related, yeah, I think you could use those. Since the zoning code is called the land use ordinance,
Yes.
you can use them interchangeably, probably.
Okay, got it. Okay, thank you. That response helps. And if we have further specificities or actual TMKs that we can look at, then we'll reach out to you. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Members, before I go into testimony, I just wanted to give you an opportunity as well to provide any thoughts that you might have that you are thinking of relating to residential uses. And if you look at the sections that DPP provided, this impacts 1 and 2 unit dwellings, multi-unit dwellings, group living facilities, small and large, accessory dwelling units, ADUs, Ohana units, rooming, and home occupations. Do any of you have any preliminary thoughts that you might want to just query DPP relating to residential use as you prepare your proposed amendments? Vice Chair Cordero.
Thank you. This is not an idea yet, but this is something that has come up exponentially. Of course, reapportionment happened, and I already had a lot of group living facilities, both large and small, in my former district. But with the addition of like the valleys and heights of Halava and Aya, I've seen a lot of group living facilities in residential areas, and they've come before the neighborhood board, and I guess residents would come before the neighborhood board with different concerns relating to the different uses that in real life occur at the group living facilities. I don't have anything specific, but I will have to look back at the minutes and notes and the emails that I received. But I just want to make sure that the concerns that so I may be bringing possible things up relating to that. Other than that, I don't have anything at the top of my head that I can mention right now, but I just really wanted to bring that up because I know that DPP especially has been at the forefront of helping us address it at the resident level. But yeah, we'll see. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Sein Okimoto, do you guys have any questions that you might have relating to the subcategories and the residential uses that Councilmember Okimoto?
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question because you mentioned it was interesting to hear the takes on the multi-use. And we know that we're dealing with the housing crisis, and so lots of ideas are being introduced and proposed. And we've recognized all the efforts that the department has done to streamline the process, but yet we still do have backlog, and for various reasons, even though you guys have done a lot of movement, I wanted to know what were the department's take on what can we do. We have these different types of residential uses, and again, it was interesting. I'm a supporter of multi-use and having those types of structures, especially in the urban areas where they're more suited. However, even in my district in Coral Ridge, there's a project will be a multi-use as well. What can the department do, and what do we need to do as a council to help the process, to help streamline these projects? Because we still are faced with the lag, and we still are faced with the need to create more residential units.
Yes, thank you for that question. The main thing that Bill 64 is going to do that's going to be a big change from the current situation would be to allow a certain amount of housing in our B1 neighborhood business district and our B2 community business district. So we currently have 2 business mixed use districts. They're business mixed use 3 and 4. 4 is downtown, and then BMX 3, it is kind of throughout the island, but there's a lot of B1 and B2 areas that could be developed with housing either above existing commercial or on very large lots in addition to commercial activities. So if the City Council passes Bill 64 with that in it, that will allow housing to be in more zoning districts. That will make potentially a big difference. So that's one of the main things that Bill 64 can do.
And thank you. And are there any things in the process as we're going through Bill 64 that will help, again, streamline? Are there, because we know that there's decades of layers and layers of regulations. And so what can we do now that this is a huge thing that Vice Chair Kiana has taken on, or committee chair has taken on, and we want to do it right. So what can we do in the process so that we can take away some of the layers that have been built over the decades of permitting?
Well, the zoning code's ability to take away some of those layers is limited because, say, for something like Koa Ridge, where a zone change was required and a sustainable communities plan change was required, and therefore an environmental impact statement was required, you kind of go back through in decades, really. It takes decades to have somebody control the land, have a vision for the land, do the environmental impact statement, and get all the way downstream until you're finally at ministerial permitting. So in some ways, what the zoning code can do is make sure that once the zoning is in place, the appropriate density is available, the appropriate height is available, and then the appropriately building envelopes, so the setbacks and the height setbacks, that actually will be potentially changing in stage 4. But, a lot of people would say that our current density allowances, especially in the apartment precincts or in the apartment district, is too low. So that's the kind of thing that we can look at. It's not in this phase. The thing that we can do in this phase is specify the types of development standards that would apply to each of these use types. So we're definitely looking at a lot of those things. And I think that, in a big picture sense, again, not related to zoning, but in a big picture sense, availability of infrastructure is a huge issue. So we need to make sure that we have adequate roads and sewers and electrical and water availability so that these areas that might be growth areas can be built and can be built quickly once the permitting is done.
Yes, thank you. And quickly is, again, I guess a subjective word here, because what it's kind of like when we use the term affordable. In some people's minds, it's not moving quick enough. And so I really am hoping we can find ways to, again, streamline the process and make the changes in the department so that we can get these projects, both residential, commercial, industrial, agricultural. We need to do a better job at getting the process smoother and more streamlined for us to meet the needs that the county really has. But thank you for answering my questions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councilmember Say, do you have any thoughts on residential use that you might be considering?
At this point in time, I do support a lot of the expansion of projects because of the housing shortage, but, how do you address the NIMBY like yesterday?
That's a very good question. I think the way I personally deal with questions that come from the community is just to respond with facts. I think a lot of the time the facts are kind of lost in the emotions. And of course the emotions are appropriate because we're all community members. We all want to live in a great place. But sometimes it helps to just talk about, like, well, this could happen automatically by right. This is the difference between that and that. So for example, yesterday, the underlying height was already 150 feet. So already in the planning process and in the zoning process, 150 feet was deemed appropriate for that area. So when somebody comes in looking for a little bit more, the fact is they could go this high. Now they're asking for this. So that kind of thing of just trying to continue to present with facts is what I tend to do.
Okay, great response. One final thought too. Has the department solicited the support or research with the University of Hawaii as far as futurism? I look at this land use ordinance as very good, very conventional, but in this period in time of 2024. What will it be in 2034? That's what I'm trying to understand, the futurism of how you want to see Oahu. And what they are saying throughout the country, that the municipalities have to change maybe. I don't know. I'm not an expert, but I just bring this up for your thoughts because watching the news yesterday, it was interesting. They have a, no, it's not a plane, but it's a transporter that is just like a plane that doesn't have to be regulated by FAA. So if I had a airport part on the roof, I could travel throughout the county without using my automobile. It was on CNN. I'm not promoting.
You sure it was CNN? Councilmember Say, do you have any other questions? Thank you so much. Thank you, Ms. Kruger. We will now proceed with in-person testimony in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the chamber who would like to testify on this item? Please come forward to the testifier podium and begin by stating your name. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, we are in discussion, and if Councilmember Say.
No, I just wanted to thank you for, breaking it down for the year. That I think the deadline for us would be maybe November or October as far as the adoption of Bill 64.
It depends on how smooth the next couple of months go. We've been dealing with this matter for a long time, and I would like to get it done by summer,
Okay, summer is great.
ideally.
That'll be great. Thank you.
So if all goes well, residential potentially 2, we'll see if the next category it might, given that telecommunications is in there, it might go a little longer. But on the agricultural one too, just hypothetically, just 6 months from February, right? And then clean up in miscellaneous uses in the end. And when I mean cleanup, I mean technical cleanup, nothing substantive for other uses that have already been completed. We've already completed industrial and commercial uses. So with regard to stakeholders, if there's anything that they have to say, they need to be doing it now. Don't come 6 months from now and say, you know what, we forgot to tell you, we want these major changes made in commercial or industrial uses, or by that time, residential uses. Anybody who has anything to say should be contacting us immediately, and any stakeholders in your district should be contacting you as well.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
thank you. Your point is very much well taken, because I have to compliment DPP. They did attend all of our neighborhood boards and making their presentations on the amendments of the land use ordinance and the development plan. But most of them tells me, Calvin, I don't understand what they're presenting. And that is a big issue for all of us. Like what Ms. Kruger just stated, yeah, you can give them the basic understanding of all of the facts and figures, etc., but they will still never understand what we are trying to achieve. Just food for thought.
Yeah, I know, it's very difficult. Thank you so much. Members, we are going to move on to agenda item number 4, informational briefing, update by the Department of Planning and Permitting on its building permit process backlog. For your information, the presentation is in your handouts and available online as Departmental Communication 26. We have from the administration, Director Don Takeuchi Opuna of the Department of Planning and Permitting. Mahalo nui, Director Opuna, for continuing to make these updates for the council and the public a priority. For good reason. There is a lot of public scrutiny on the status of DPP's permitting process, but I know that the current administration, the director, and our staff are doing everything they can to improve the process and reduce the processing time, including reallocating staff resources, prioritizing hiring, and other creative ideas. So thank you for being here today. Director?
Thank you, Chair. We're trying to find the PowerPoint. Just be a second. Sorry about that. Thank you for allowing us to do this informational briefing and update on the building permit process backlog. So before we get into the building permits and the backlog, I just wanted to talk about a lot of the other things that we do at DPP that aren't necessarily recognized as much because we are so focused on the backlog. We have other divisions that do many things. So we looked back in 2023 and compiled all this data and information about some of our accomplishments, including, this is very busy, I'm sorry, the PowerPoint would have presented it one by one, but in any case, we conducted over 116,500 inspections in the last year, divided over about 18,000 for site development, 85,000 in building, and 13,300 in zoning. And then if you look at the green box to the left, we reviewed and processed many different types of land use related permits, such as 180 subdivisions, 220 construction plans, 380 grading permits, and then you are well aware of the 201H permits and 18 SMA major permits. And then following through at the bottom, going counterclockwise, we stood up the Oahu Historic Preservation Commission with the first meeting in July, and having performed 5 total meetings, the commission has been able to submit the certified local government application to SHPD in October, and then it will go to the National Historic Preservation Commission. And then further counterclockwise to the dark green box, we've created 140 GIS maps serving a variety of city agencies. And then above that, we've established and ran 3 external task force groups and continued 3 internal groups to help further develop some of our processes. And then lastly, staff reviewed 16 demonstrations of potential permitting software to complete the scope of work. So now we can move into this chart that I normally share with you, the residential permitting. So the pre-screen we seem to have completely taken control of, and then in the code review, it's gone up slightly to 5 months and 4 weeks, so maybe a week out. So definitely the shift in the backlog from the pre-screen is currently in the code review phase. And this, as requested, does not include online permits like solar, et cetera, which make up 70% of residential permits. And next is the commercial permitting. There has been, the shift has definitely made its way to the code review. We now are a couple months more than we were last reported, and then the approved to issue went up a little too. So again, looking back at 2023 with regard to residential permits, if you look at the chart on the left, we accumulated data each month in 2023, which is the number of permit applications that were created. This is post pre-screen, so they've passed the pre-screen. So that's the green column. And then those that were issued in the same month, those are in the red column. So these are not necessarily, the same permits, obviously, but it just shows you the rate at which applications are coming in versus those that are being approved. And specifically around July, August, and September, you see that bump, and that's exactly when the pre-screen had come completely down and a lot of the backlog completely shifted. And I think I reported back in August that we had conquered the pre-screen. So you can see in the table and in the chart to the right that in August there is this spike. For commercial, the same thing. This seems to be a lot bigger shift in August and September, which is normally between 200 and 300 applications coming in. The pre-screen backlog shift, it was all the way up to 921 in September. So, these are much more complicated projects, but we definitely feel it in September. So they are dealing with this backlog. These two graphs give you an idea of the number of applications that are coming in over time since COVID. And so 2021, 2022, and 2023, the applications that were created are increasing over time. And those that are issued, if you were to draw the same trend line, that blue line, it'd be kind of flat. So I think that indicates the capacity that we have had the same capacity, but applications have increased over time for both residential and commercial. And so what are we doing? As I've stated before, people, processes, and technology, our ongoing improvements are continuing to try to hire and fill positions and adjusting positions. So we had 15 vacant engineering positions last January, and we haven't been able to fill those. So we're looking at downgrading those positions or creating engineering tech positions to look at the less complicated commercial permits in order to move things more quickly. We're working on our learning and development program to train staff, which has been a major puka in what we do. I spoke to one of the supervisors of the residential permits, and a lot of catching up with the backlog in residential code is going to depend on the timing and the ability for us to train our staff quickly on code review. And then modernizing technologies, we have the software for our permitting system that we're very close to signing on. We have more artificial intelligence in the code review and other technologies that are also going to help move things faster. Streamlining processes. Our consultant Acuity has been working very hard in the last several months, working through bottlenecks and creating standard operating procedures. And then with all the things that we're doing internally, it's important that we address the external factors. So we're working on ways to ensure better quality of plans and ways to modify behavior on the outside so that we have better plans coming in, that the bad quality plans won't be allowed in so that they won't slow the process. So all this will take time, and we're all working on it. What we're doing here, we're working on issues that have been decades in the making. So it's not going to be overnight, but we're working as fast as we can. But in the meantime, we are doing things like the enhanced code review. So that's the contract with a vendor to duplicate many of the internal reviews in specific areas where we think that it's particularly slow or backlogged. That contract is, we're working through the procurement process, and in the next couple of weeks, we hope to issue that procurement so that we can get those contractors in and working on permits. So other than that, I think that, yes, that concludes my presentation, but I'm available for any questions that you have.
Thank you, Director. Before I open it to questions, can you expand a little bit more about this, the contracting team? What numbers are we looking at, and are these engineers? How many people, bodies? I want to feel that for the progress needed for code review, that we have some light at the end of the tunnel here to help in decreasing that backlog.
So I think it depends on which areas we're going to concentrate on. For example, mechanical, electrical, or building review, or other specific areas. The contract itself, I think we're doing a request for bid. And And it would depend on, exactly how many permits we want them to look on. It has to be quantity specific. So we're trying to figure out what the best way to quantify. If one firm can only fill so much capacity, we would like to be able to go to the next bidder as well. So it depends on, you're right, the number, the quantity defined of permits, as well as the type, and the bidder's ability to fill that order. But based on the money that we have, we want to be able to really focus in on certain areas, certain types of permits.
Are you crafting the procurement process with enough flexibility so that if a specific vendor can only fill a certain niche, that you might have multiple vendors fulfilling the contract?
I think so, but from what I understand, these types of firms, they do basically the same, building, mechanical, electrical.
Okay.
It's all pretty much generic work. So, but that is, I think that's one factor that we have to look at too.
Just to build it in now, because I know the procurement process takes so long to begin with, just provide as much flexibility so that you can, hit the ground running. And when can we anticipate that this procurement process will be completed and that you go out to bid?
We're hoping to do it this month. I mean, it might be at the end of this month, but to have it out on the street quickly, so that they can respond quickly and we can move forward.
And what is the turnaround time for that? 30 days?
30 days generally. It could be shorter. I think the fact that, like I mentioned, that this type of service is very prevalent on the mainland. It's a kind of a generic service that not too complicated or unusual. So I think we can make it faster, more expedited than some other of these procurements.
And I'm assuming that you have a network to disseminate the solicitation.
Yes, because we've already, we've seen some demonstrations from, I think, at least 3 different firms that do this.
Okay, yes. Thank you so much. Members, any questions? Vice Chair Cordero.
Thank you. Hi, Director Apuna. Thank you very much. we really appreciate everything that you're doing to address all this. With that, I'm really interested in about the 16 demonstrations for the potential permitting software. Is that relating to different permitting from commercial to residential? And how do you determine the 16 different demonstrations?
So the 16 demonstrations refer to replace our current permitting software, which is Posse. Right now it's called Posse. So we put out a request for, I think, information or demonstration, and we received, I think, 16 to 20 different responses, and then we were able to set up 16 demonstrations. So staff throughout the department who kind of volunteered to be part of a committee went through all of these demonstrations, and a lot of them were at least an hour long, and they were able to listen in, ask questions, and see if the systems that were being proposed would work well with the type of work we do.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Councilmember Cordero, Councilmember Say, any questions? Councilmember Say.
Director Apuna, is it possible that you could do for us in the out years a baseline? That is a baseline, for example, residential permits, that you folks created 16,000 and issued 13,000 as an example. That becomes part of your baseline in evaluating the productivity of the increase of your particular operation, meaning the...
Sure. So basically setting forth the backlog and seeing how much we're reducing it, absolutely. And that's what our managers in commercial and residential, they've begun to seriously look at that data and set benchmarks and goals in the coming months that we will share with you.
Well, thank you. And then the other point, which I was watching the telecast from the state capitol on the Senate Ways and Means in regards to the economic forecast, the concern in regards to the shortage of labor here in the state of, the shortage of labor here in the state of Hawaii. And recognizing that you had how many vacant engineering positions for a number of years now?
yeah, I think there was like 80 to 90 vacant positions.
I don't have the answer, but I've talked to NOLA as far as will the administration look at how to address our civil service laws? And this is for the 4 counties, not just Oahu, because even the state is tremendous shortage in their personnel categories also. So I bring this up in anticipation of how we folks want to look towards the future. If you could outsource it, be my guest, like what you did with the 16 different ideas, etc. But more importantly, I wanted you to just say thank you. It's been about 3 years for both Esther and I and Radiant, and the accomplishment that the department has done is commendable. And I think the chair asked me to ask you, when would you want us to go and visit you again at a different division so we can take a picture? Thank you.
Thank you. And no, we appreciate all of you for your support and all your help. I just want to say, you know, I am very kind of anxious and restless at this point because we're right on the verge of so many of these contracts being executed. So this is 2024 is a year of execution. It feels, I know you guys still get complaints or questions, but this year, I don't think we'll get all of it done, but we're going to make significant strides, and I think you'll see that. So I'm excited about these updates that we will be able to share a lot more, and we really do appreciate all your support. Thank you.
Thank you. You know that at the time that this solicitation should be selected, it's going to kickstart the Year of the Dragon. So, you know, you got to kickstart the momentum for the Year of the Dragon. Any other questions? If there are no other questions, thank you so much. We will now proceed with in-person testimony in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify in this item? Please come forward to the testifier podium and begin by stating your name. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Thank you so much. Members, we are in discussion. If there is no further discussion, we will move on to agenda item number 5, informational briefing, update on the Economic Revitalization Commission 2023 annual report. Members, for your information, the report is in your binder and also available online as Mayor's Message 252. We have from the administration, Amy Asselby, Executive Director of the Office of Economic Revitalization. I understand we have Mr. Olen Lagon, Chair of the Economic Revitalization Commission, who is joining us remotely, and Ms. Eliza Talbot, Vice Chair of the Commission, who is here in person. Thank you all of, thanks to all of you for joining us today. Please proceed. And if you could just turn the mic on as well. Have a red light will turn on. Yep. There you have it.
That will help. All right, good morning. Thanks so much for having us today. Eliza Talbot, I am the vice chair of the commission, and for the sake of brevity and to make sure that I stay on track, I'm going to stick with my script, but if there are questions, we are happy to take them as well. So aloha and good morning, committee members. I'm here today with Olin Lagan, who is the chair of the commission. He is joining us remotely today. His family is under the weather, so he is remote. Mahalo for making time for us today, and mahalo to the fellow commissioners that are watching online. Today we will share a summary of the Commission's 2023 report, and we will be happy to answer any questions. I believe you all have a copy of a printed copy of the report. The audience can also download it on the OER's website, which is revitalizeoahu.org, or you can simply scan the code on the screen. So the city created an Economic Revitalization Commission with 9 members. We are appointed by Mayor Blangiardi. That was in 2022. We were tasked with advising OER through a strategic economic development plan and meeting at least once a quarter. Our members have expertise in small business, finance, sustainable economics, and community development. It is a dynamic and forward-thinking group. It is a pleasure to work with them and the team at the Office of OER. Representing small business are entrepreneurs Deb Louie Anderson and Melly James. Deb has led many small businesses in Honolulu, most recently as a partner and project manager at CNC Farmlands LLC, as well as Morning Brew restaurants. Melly has been a leader at a number of startups in Hawaii and California and is co-founder of Mana Up. Entrepreneur Keone Lee and banker Anthony Mizuno are experts in finance. Keone leads Hawaii Investment Ready as CEO and is a co-founder of the Kavaivai Collective and OEV TV. Tony is a senior vice president at American Savings Bank. Representing sustainable economics are myself, attorney Greg Kim, and Reed Chung of Hawaii USA Federal Credit Union. I am currently the vice president of business advocacy and community relations for the Chamber of Commerce Hawaii. Greg's career as an attorney focuses on corporate law, securities, and mergers and acquisitions, with an emphasis on startups and small businesses. Reed has extensive experience in finance and leadership, having been an executive at the Bank of Hawaii, Central Pacific Bank, American Savings Bank, and Morgan Stanley. Olu Campbell and Olin Lagan bring their mana'o to community development. Olu is the president and CEO of the Hawaii Land Trust and was previously community and government relations manager at Kamehameha Schools. He is also Keiki Oka'aina. Olin Lagan is a serial entrepreneur who launched multiple companies from here that have had millions of users around the world, as well as organizations like Kanu Hawaii and Purple Maya. The Commission's work is guided by 3 values: community, equality, and good jobs for our community. We adopted these values from the OER. In 2023, the Commission met 6 times, including an introductory meeting in January and regular meetings in February, April, July, October, and November. We invested a significant amount of time in reviewing 7 strategic plans and research papers that are the foundation of OER's work. These include the Oahu SEDS Strategy 2022, Hawaii Statewide SEDS 2022, Aspen Institute's Good Jobs Initiative, Aina Aloha Economic Futures, Aloha United Way Asset Limited Income Constrained Employed Report 2022, the HTA's Oahu Destination Management Plan, UHeroes Studies Local Food COVID Business Impacts 2021 Housing. Our consensus for our first year was to craft actionable strategic priorities based on established strategic plans instead of duplicating efforts to create a separate strategic plan for the city and county. We agreed that the focus of the economic recovery effort should be on creating a just and equitable economy that provides good jobs for Oahu residents. This is a challenge, given the wide-ranging inequities that face our community. The first year's work highlighted hard economic realities that thousands of families struggle with every day. In one disturbing example, we learned that nearly 75% of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander keiki live below the ALICE threshold for poverty. The goal is not to create more plans, but to fill gaps in the economic recovery system, especially for our neighbors affected the most by deep-rooted inequalities. Oh, okay. We might need to unmute Olin. At this point, I'll turn it over to Olin to talk about our ideas from the commission.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted. Aloha mai kako. Aloha, Madam Chair, Kia Aina, and members Cordero, Okimoto, and Say. Kalamai for not being there in person, but my entire ohana is sick, so we got our first flu of the year. You know, one quick note before I get into the ideas is, as Eliza was talking about the reports that we read, the one that struck me really deeply, and other members as well, was the ALICE report from 2023. In that report, it really does highlight how much suffering there is in our community. So 50% of families with keiki live under the poverty guideline. And it's also not equal to. So 75% of Native Hawaiian keiki live in homes under this poverty guideline. So the work that OER does is really crucial, and we really appreciate all of the support that the council is providing. Okay, so we generated 20 ideas last year in our first round, and you can find that on pages 5 and 6 of our report. And after much discussion, we boiled it down to these 3 ideas that you see on the screen. And so these ideas do align with the 2022 Oahu Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy, or Oahu CEDS. And so this CEDS does prioritize a post-COVID economic recovery that focuses on long-term economic sustainability and resilience, based on indigenous knowledge, inclusive communities, and shared values. Okay. Next slide, please. Okay, so the first idea is really one that is fundamental across many city operations. It's really a grant administrator that's dedicated to the principles of this economic development and resilience strategy. So it's to position the city to better procure more future state and federal grant funding and make it possible for OER to sustain and expand its operations and programming. And so one important note here is that we do have with OER an existing RFP for a grants contractor valued at $250,000. So this agreement with the final vendor may last through 2026, and it will support more than just OER and include the Office of Climate Change, Sustainability and Resiliency, the Office of Housing, and the Mayor's Office on Cultural and the Arts. And next slide, please. Okay, so idea 2 is to connect businesses to opportunity. And so we believe that we can provide specific support to help local, small, and disadvantaged businesses within our own city's procurement processes and other local opportunities. So this initial emphasis will be to understand today's baseline for local city procurement opportunities and gather information from city departments on the steps to expand the use of local contractors by the city. This could mean suggestions to amend the RFP process to help eliminate barriers to qualified local businesses, ensure more of our own dollars are spent here locally to support companies. And so one important connector with this is OER is launching a new program called the Oahu Business Connector. And so it's going to feature many of OER's existing support for small businesses, along with a new website that will serve, excuse me, as a hub to connect small businesses with services from nonprofits, government agencies, and support organizations. So among the business service providers that will be supported will be training to become a certified 8A by the Small Business Administration, or gain eligibility to become a vendor to the state or Hawaii's county governments. Also, Hawaii Compliance Express and other contractual requirements. Next slide, please. So the third idea is one that's focused on incubators and accelerators. More business incubators and accelerators are being established here on Oahu, but even they have limits on how many they can serve. And unfortunately, many small businesses most in need of them do not have access as demand exceeds available opportunities. So through OER's outreach and data team, the office can identify grants to provide additional funding to these incubators and accelerators to specifically support the types of businesses, organizations, and communities most in need of business incubation and accelerator programs. OER can support the funding for incubator programming and facilities to boost economic development in underserved communities and among minority and disadvantaged business owners. This idea aligns with OER's planned small business startup program that will fund and expand existing accelerator and incubator programs to focus on entrepreneurs from disadvantaged backgrounds or in underserved communities. Now, I've seen this firsthand. So at our Purple Maya Purple Prize, where we support Oiwi-rooted companies, and Found Her, where we have an accelerator for Wahine-founded companies, there are just so many companies out there that desperately need this type of support, and we've seen them grow millions in revenue so far across the cohorts. One has gotten venture funding and is starting to export on the continent. So these types of seeds that are planted absolutely do matter and are able to be targeting these startups that are from these communities of disadvantaged means. So we are seeking $500,000 to $2 million in competitive funding for this project. This will establish a city mechanism for supporting existing incubators and accelerators in Hawaii so they can better serve minority and underserved individuals and communities. There'll be a focus on startups and new business. This is versus DBET's accelerator support for tech and manufacturing businesses towards growth and export. Okay. So our work in 2024 is starting this year. So we formed a permitted interaction group that will make recommendations on our work for this year and recommendations on how we will spend productively the $50,000 that we got from the City Council that's put into the OER budget. And so these recommendations will be aligned with our 3 strategic ideas. As you see here, we are meeting on January 23rd to go over the recommendations from the permitted interaction group. So some key takeaways. In summary, the Commission is dedicated to community, equity, and good jobs for our community. We developed 3 strategic ideas and will soon have a work plan for 2024 for these ideas. And lastly, we hope to work with the Honolulu City Council and administration on these ideas. We see OER as an absolutely critical part of equitable growth, and I'm grateful for the support of OER from the Council. This is money incredibly well spent, and to be honest, a place where additional investments should be considered. Mahalo nui loa for your time. We're happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Chair Lagan, as well as Vice Chair Talbot for providing this presentation. And I'm looking forward to your work plan for 2024, and I hope that it will be in tandem with our budgetary cycle. This year is going to be very, very rough, as you may already know, because the council and the administration still has to deal with the hazard pay issue for city employees related to the COVID pandemic. And even with reprogramming of ARPA funds, there still may be the need for funds as part of the upcoming budget. So, but having said that, it's always good to plan and to see what can be undertaken, not just in addition to the base funding for OER, but within the budget of OER for the upcoming budget. I have a couple of questions first before we go into other members, if the other members don't mind. With regard to the grants administrator, I know that Director Asselby knows that this has been a priority for mine ever since I came to the council. So can you give me a status of the RFP for the grants contractor? And also, I noted in the report that it was very specific. So I want to make sure I understand that this contract is specifically for assisting for the offices attached to the mayor as opposed to the city overall. So maybe my question is twofold. Number one, the status on that. And second, what is the update on the status of an overall grants administrator for the city?
Sure, thank you. Kim Sparlin, Deputy Director, Office of Economic Revitalization. I'm kind of point on this, so I'm going to take those questions. We are weeks away from posting that RFP. We've spent a lot of time with Budget and Fiscal Service, with Corporate Counsel, with members of the community to make sure that we're putting into the request something that is going to give us what we really think we want, and make sure that at the end of the day we have a product that's not only valuable for those offices that you mentioned that are attached to the mayor's office, but can then be replicated out into the city. So we see this as kind of a small pilot project. If we had $1 million, sure, we could go citywide, but with $250,000, we had to scope it down a little bit. And so it's not just somebody coming in and writing grants for us, it's improving processes, it's looking at the processes and saying, here's where we can maybe cut some time from the process. As you know, procurement clearly takes a while, as this one has. And what is it that we can do better? And then how do we build the capacity of our staff? So there's a little bit of a learning lab in there as well, in training staff to go after these grants. What one word means to one department and what it means to another department sometimes are a little bit nuanced. And so we need to make sure that those that are writing these grant applications to these federal entities or these philanthropic entities are speaking the right language. And unfortunately, that's just something that you learn through doing. So we want to give them some space to do that and to learn from those who have done and have, taken the bumps and bruises along the way. So it's a complicated, very wide-ranging contract that we're putting out. Don't want to go into too many details so we don't give any competitive advantages here, but that should be out in the next few weeks. And then with respect to the second part of your question, as far as going citywide, we're going to take the lessons learned from this, share them with the managing director's office, with obviously all the departments, and then see where we can go from there.
Thank you so much. And then just another question regarding the element of supporting local businesses, which I think we all support. Does the state procurement code, which the city has to follow, allow for prioritization for local businesses?
Depends on the method of procurement. So when you're doing a small purchase and you're just requesting for the lowest bid, not necessarily. So we ran into that situation, ironically, with this commission. Our facilitator was not from Hawaii. He was able to get us through the process, but there was this kind of itch in the back of our head of the irony of the whole situation. And so if you do a full request for proposal, you can score things a little bit differently, but you're still not going to score them completely in a way that favors it. So that's something that we've been talking about. I think when you talk about using federal money, though, there are some limitations as far as excluding and limiting to certain areas. So there's a lot that goes into it.
Thank you so much. And, I know the Chair Lagan was talking about getting more businesses qualified for the 8A program. And I just want to make sure that you guys have been following the Ultima case in Tennessee that challenged the overall 8A program. And it has been concerned by the Small Business Administration for the entire program, but of course for Native Hawaiian organizations who have a different status. And so the reason I'm mentioning this is, number one, I want to make sure that we are all following it and similar cases that challenge the constitutionality of that program. But also, I think you're talking about the data that you're collecting is so critically important, because that's what is needed to show the justification of why this program is necessary. And whether it be all of the data that you collect from the businesses, as well as the Alice report data that you've cited, I just want to make sure that Oahu is in a strong position to help lead the state of Hawaii as it's going to impact us. And I'm going to open up to other members, but you guys are following that case? And I have been in contact with the Mark Spain from the SBA, because I know they're all concerned, and I'm hoping that there could be more collaboration among small businesses here to make sure that we can withstand any constitutional challenges. Members, any questions on the report? Councilmember Shea.
This is for the chair Olin? Olin? Yeah, okay.
Remember?
This is just my personal thoughts. If you go back in history in the 50s and the 60s and 70s, if you recall, there were four economic pillars: agriculture, tourism, defense spending, and construction. Today, being 2024, I believe the only two pillars that are in existence is tourism and military spending. In the three steps that you have, that the commission has done an excellent job, don't get me wrong, could you create another step in regards to how do we procure new monies in the global market? Meaning, if you want to do the pop-ups, makekis, etc., how do you market it in a global matter? That way, you're bringing in new capital, new money into the state. Not federal monies now, not foreign money for construction. We don't have agriculture. And I was just looking for a replacement as far as how your generation is thinking. You know what I'm trying to get at? That's what the state of Hawaii depends on. Defense spending, which will be a big one for 2024 with the major construction at Pearl Harbor. Tourism is going to be flat. It all depends what the ledge decides to do. So the new money coming in will be very limited. But how can we go and address another sector of Oahu's economy? And then try to get the state to get involved, because these members of the legislature do not realize that Oahu is the engine for the state of Hawaii. If this engine sputters, the whole state sputters. And that's what I wanted to find out. Did the creativity of your commission look at another source of bringing in new capital that will be circulating, rather than having these type of programs just using money that has already come in and circulating with it? You see what I'm trying to get at? Thank you.
Yeah, Councilmember Say, I appreciate the question, and I would love to have long conversations about this. This is my life's work, about bringing in additional funds. All of my companies have scaled to millions of dollars in revenue from outside of Hawaii. My current energy company has revenue coming into the state from 3 countries and 8 different states. So this is absolutely possible. The commission's work is really focused, council member, on planting seeds. You mentioned the 50s, 60s, 70s. Let me talk a little bit about the 70s. So like, I came from public housing, KPT, Pololo Housing, and the city and organizations planted seeds. So HCAP helped me with paying our energy bill. Palama sediment, I got my teeth done. I still got metal in my teeth from that. You, Mr. Council Member, you bought our jackets for our baseball team. We lost every game for 2 years, and yet you supported the Palolo Housing Boys. And so these seeds do make a difference. And this is how you get out of poverty. This is how we address equity. So unfortunately, the question you're asking is really a bigger question, and we're really laser focused on the equity portion of things. And so the ideas that we have are really designed to start these first-time entrepreneurs or people just starting out. And we do know that when you get 40 or 50 of these groups, 1 or 2 are going to get to that point that you mentioned. Like when I mentioned the Purple Prize at Purple Maya, 50 companies went through. One has venture funding from the founder of Google and is expanding internationally. And so we didn't think about that when we first started, but that's sort of how those numbers games work, is that you need to provide these really important seeds. And so to wrap up, I do think that we are at the precipice of some pretty transformational industries here. So energy, we're going from 6 billion of imported oil to 6 billion of procured services to manage indigenous power. Like, that is a once in a generation opportunity for local companies to take charge. And how many energy companies do we have here that are locally owned? And that opportunity is in the next 2 to 3 years. Same thing is happening with transportation. Same thing is happening with agriculture. We're at the precipice of farming microbes versus farming animals and plants. And so there's these radical transformations that are happening. But I think to get to that, we need to make sure that we focus that it's not just these larger companies that take advantage of that, but we grow this next generation of keiki Aina that are from here, that can stay here, so that our kids don't have to leave. So it's a long-winded question, but really the summary is we're focused on planting seeds of equity.
Thank you, Olin. I'm not a pessimist. May I continue on, Madam Chair?
Yes.
I'm not a pessimist, but one of my major concerns for the commission, if you could look into it, is the arrival of Amazon. As far as for me, going back to the 50s and 60s, all of your mom and pop stores and retail shops will probably not exist in the next decade because everything will be online. Can the state legislature or the city council do something to address this type of monopolization for the state of Hawaii or for the county of Oahu? It's just food for thought, Olin, and I bring it up because a lot of the small guys that I do talk to are very much concerned about the arrival of Amazon. Their high interest rates that they have to pay for their commercial loans, the increase in energy costs, insurance costs, everything. And I'm trying to be a very optimistic, positive person also. And I agree with you 110% that we all start off with incubators and work your way to the global market. And I just think about it because if it's a reality, I don't know what's going to happen to this county and state that I so dearly love. Your thoughts, Olin and Eva, Eliza?
Yeah, I guess I'll just say quickly. Yeah, my nephew is a mail carrier, and he told me he went from one route to 3 routes in one day, and it's primarily Amazon. So yeah, these things are disrupting our local businesses. A few years ago at Kanu, we ran the state's first statewide Eat Local Challenge, where we worked at restaurants and markets. Zippy's switched out their eggs for local eggs, and we were really struggling to find restaurants that could produce just one meal that was 100% local, from the oil that they use to the veggies and the starches, and so it is difficult. And so my one sort of thing that I talk to folks about is that we have to always vote with our pocketbooks, and so that's the thing that I'm trying to lead by example, and the groups that we work with do buy local. But I took a note there, and we'll take it back to the commission. It's a really good point, Council Member.
Thank you very much. Eliza?
Just to play devil's advocate too, council member, one thing that we do know is that with the pop-up makeke that was started by CNHA during the pandemic, they actually use Amazon to distribute a lot of the local products that are made by our Native Hawaiian community. So, Amazon's played a key role in actually getting those products to be available to people that otherwise wouldn't even know they exist. And so in some ways, there's also a push-pull there that I think we should kind of consider. And then the other thing is Amazon has a new project where they are helping, it's going to be launched soon, and I don't want to talk too much about it in detail today, but they are launching an entrepreneur program where they provide the funding for new business owners in Hawaii. And so I think, they understand that they need to fulfill a role here and be part of the community as well. So just wanted to also add that.
May I just say thank you very much, Ms. Talbot, because I don't even get to talk to individual or companies like Amazon to see what their future is here in the state of Hawaii. And that's a concern I have also. Thank you.
Yeah, one other point, if I may, just disclosure for Amazon. So Amazon does support my energy company. So they selected us as one of 10 companies in the world that they wanted to help accelerate our business model. And so they're supporting us. They have a video of me on their homepage for clean energy. And so they do provide certain levers of support that are materially helping us export Hawaii technology. So there are some other parts of this as well, too.
Thank you. Any other council member? Any questions? Okay, I have a question just with regard to the launching of the Oahu Business Connector program. Can I get an idea of when this launch date will be, and what are some of the challenges that you're anticipating and ways to address it?
Sure, thank you for that. We are we're conducting beta testing with some businesses and our entrepreneurial support organizations, our resource partners, we call them. They're the ones that provide the technical assistance, and we're the connector, right? And so we're doing beta testing early February. We're going to be doing a soft launch at the end of February. You should be getting an invitation shortly to save the date. So that we'll be doing training with the ESO organizations, and then doing a meet and greet with some of the businesses that beta tested to talk about it. Some of the challenges are just making sure that the information is up to date. You know, it's only going to be as good as the information that's there and people can trust it. And so our team has done a yeoman's effort reaching out to all of these entrepreneurial support organizations to make sure that they are listed on there. We had identified over 120 of these organizations in our community that are primarily nonprofit and government entities alone. There are a few for-profit in there. They're like co-working spaces or commercial kitchens that we decided to include as well, because we think that that's very important. That's what we hear when we're out on the street that folks are looking for. So we wanted to make sure that they knew where those were. But it's getting the buy-in and making sure that, you know, this isn't just a yellow pages, that it really is an interactive tool. In addition to just this pairing, you know, you can go in as a business and say, I'm a women-owned business in the retail space and I'm looking for, and then they come up with a plan, and you can reach out to those organizations directly. We have been working very hard over the last few months with some of these partners to build webinar series, so very short talk story series, so folks can listen to it in the car or they can listen to it on the farm, and just kind of those nuggets of, I didn't even know that I needed to think about that. So starting to strengthen our entrepreneurial economy in that regard as well. Those webinar series will be posted on there. So we have, like I said, a series anywhere from 10 to 12 minutes at a time, 4 or 5 different individual talking points, 3 talking points that walk away in each of those within a subject matter area. So access to capital, how to register your business, how to work with the film industry. These opportunities that we're seeing that we want to make sure that our entrepreneurs know how to be a part of. What we're really excited as well on top of all of that is a calendar. So there's a community calendar on there. So these organizations that are a part of our connector will be able to say, hey, I'm putting on this seminar, I'm putting on this training session. We have you know, the opportunities for these cohort applications, and all of those can be listed on there. So folks have one-stop shop to kind of go to. When you're starting a business, especially in Hawaii, so many of them are starting out as a side business, right? You don't have time to do this research. So we're trying to minimize some of these pain points, and time is money. And the more that we can get them connected with these support organizations and this education, the quicker they're going to be able to turn those profits and, very much like you said, go through that growth phase that we see, that we can hand them off to the state, or we can hand, you know, they take over Amazon themselves and become part of the global economy.
Thank you so much for that. Members, no further questions? I wanted to thank both the Office of Economic Revitalization as well as the Chair and Vice Chair of the Commission for being here today, and for the excellent report that you guys have put out. We're looking forward again to your actionable items in a work plan in concert, hopefully, with the budget, and looking forward to all of the strategic items you have identified coming on board. We will now proceed with in-person testimony in the council chamber. Clerks, do we have any in-person testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Is there anyone else in the council chamber who would like to testify on this item? Please come forward to the testifier podium and begin by stating your name. Seeing none, we will now proceed with remote testimony. Clerks, do we have any remote testifiers for this item?
Chair, there are none.
Clerks, is there anyone else standing by remotely to testify?
Chair, there are none.
Members, if there is no further discussion, there being no further business, this meeting is adjourned.